The EU has a growing capacity to initiate and coordinate a shared response to crises and disasters. This is a remarkable fact, considering that crisis management remains a core responsibility of the nation-state. In this brief film, we explain how the EU developed these capacities and how they work. The crisis management capacities of the EU can be categorized into three types of crises. First, the overwhelmed member state. Second, crises outside the Union. And third, the transboundary crisis. The EU is building policies, organizations, tools, funds, and teams for each kind of crisis.
We speak of a national crisis when a member state is overwhelmed by a large-scale disaster like a flood or an earthquake. In that case, the EU can coordinate a joint response by the member states. Over the past couple of decades, civil protection has emerged as a new policy area. Several big crises gave rise to the idea that the EU could play a role in helping member states help each other. In 2001, the EU created the Civil Protection Mechanism. This is a specific procedure to coordinate a joint response by the member states. It has been used quite a few times in the past years. DG ECHO is the Commission DG for humanitarian assistance. The EU Emergency Response Center in that DG is the hub for coordination. The European Response Center offers a platform for coordination and communication in times of disaster. There is a database in which an overwhelmed member state can log its needs. So it may need helicopters or it may need rescue teams. The ERC will then communicate those needs to the other member states. The other member states can then log in the database what they can make available during the disaster. Each member state has specific teams ready to be used during a disaster. The European Response Center offers training for those teams. In addition, the European Response Center has ambitions to collect and analyze information about emerging threats and to provide early warnings to member states. The Civil Protection Mechanism is one of the great achievements of the European Union, for it provides an efficient and effective way of coordinating a joint response to an overwhelmed member states. However, it's not being used very much because we don't have that many states that are being completely overwhelmed by a disaster. An intriguing development is that the Civil Protection Mechanism is being increasingly used to coordinate member state assistance to crises outside the Union.
We speak of an external crisis or disaster when the crisis happens outside EU territory. The European Union is offering assistance together often with international organizations such as the UN. Assistance can come in many forms. It can come as humanitarian aid, civil protection assistance, or military missions for peacekeeping. The EU started to organize its civil military capacity as a reaction to the Yugoslavian war in the 1990s. In 2003, it landed a military mission in the Congo to assist the United Nations, and it has also organized police and civil military missions to the former Yugoslavia. The European Union has become increasingly active in international disaster assistance, using its civil protection mechanism to coordinate assistance. It did so, for example, in the Haiti disaster in 2010. There are many players involved. DG ECHO does disasters. In conflict and post-conflict areas, the European External Action Service works with the Council institutions, such as the EU military staff and a whole set of other institutions, to organize missions abroad. But nothing can happen without explicit authorization by member states. It's a complex procedure. First, the EU has to find a consensus among its 28 member states. Then the Council will ask all its institutions, including the External Action Service, to prepare the mission. The pros of the new capacities of the European Union is that it is becoming an international actor. Of course, the missions are still smaller than the ones of the US. But on the positive side, the EU can go where the US cannot go, precisely because it's more acceptable to China and Russia. Another advantage is that the European Union has a broader palette of crisis management instruments than the UN.
A transboundary crisis is a crisis that hits multiple member states at once and travels across political and sectoral boundaries. Europe has experience with transboundary crises. We can think back to Chernobyl, the mad cow crisis, the recent ash cloud crisis, the financial crisis, dioxin chicken, and cyber crises are just some of the examples. The European Union is building capacities for managing transboundary crises in almost all of the different policy sectors in which it operates: financial, terrorism, water, food, health, critical infrastructures, for example. It's helping member states to cooperate. It's a platform coordinate for coordination, and things are moving ahead. It has very little real organizing power at the moment, however. For example, if you look at a pandemic, a lot of problems arise. If you consider that in each individual member state you have perhaps 10, 15 agencies who would be responsible for responding to a pandemic crisis. Multiply that by all of the different member states. You add on the EU's own agencies and the different directorates general of the European Commission, and it's very difficult to figure out who's in charge and all the different actors which are involved. A transboundary crisis is the kind of crisis which means that individual member state responses is not going to be enough. There needs to be some cooperative European approach. So in fact, that's where the European Union can really provide added value. The problem is transboundary crises really touch upon very sensitive national sovereignty concerns. And this is where national leaders, member states, are sometimes reluctant to allow the European Union to further develop in this line of crisis management capacity. Well, although member states are sometimes reluctant to empower the European Union to take on more crisis management capacity, there are enough actors out there who see the importance of a European-wide response to transboundary crises. And steps are being taken in that direction. For instance, we have the Solidarity Clause, a new treaty obligation for member states to cooperate, to coordinate when a transboundary crisis hits the continent. We have the new European External Action Service, which is supposed to take an internal and external view of crises. And we have organizational reforms, which are bringing together the Commission's crisis management responsibilities, which are all relevant towards transboundary crises. So things are going to continue, they're going to move forward. The question now becomes, what kind of debate do we want to have about what this should look like?